All right, so we're going to go through how to segment all of your required structures. So we're going to start off with the bone because arguably that is the easiest piece of anatomy to segment. And we're going to follow it the exact same steps that we've done in our one-on-one training. So of course, we're going to go through, just create a nice structure that we're going to label bone. And in this case, because bone is largely uniform, all we need to do is we'll hit our threshold window. We're going to set a threshold so that includes the bone, or just the bone, nothing else. We'll try to get as close as we possibly can. In this case, reduce noise. What does that do? Nope, nothing. All right. So now it's all a matter of just setting your threshold and hitting apply to active structure. So as we can see right now, I'm going to go ahead and enable the 3D. We'll return to the VR. And we've segmented in just one click the entire axillary skeleton, including the cranium, your cervical spine, your T-spine, even the hyoid bone right here. Now to make, of course, these structures a different color, you'll go through the select split operation that we went through in our training there. So if I want a different colored mandible, the bone structure is my active structure. Select the mandible in entirety and press split. Now for these particular areas right here, it's just a simple matter of extending the threshold. Try to look for that gap here. Yep, right there. We'll extend our threshold to include that. Broaden it right there, and then we'll just use your grow tool or your add tool. It doesn't really matter. In this case, we'll make sure use threshold is turned on, and we'll just fill that in. No problem. Do that along there just to make sure that the entire maxillary cavity is created. And once again, we'll just expand our threshold to make sure we're getting the posterior portion. Use your grow tool, grow that in as well. Now, of course, this will be also highly dependent on the resolution of the image itself as to whether the level of detail of bone is going to be captured there. So just be advised. So now, in regards to that, when it comes to really fine bone, such as we see the ethmoid sinus or the sphenoid, pardon me if I mislabeled them, but we have our little terminates here that we'd like to actually be included in our segmentation. And the easiest way of doing that, because these are such small structures, it requires us to have a resolution that is much higher in terms of structure detail. We can get away with something just like this, as we can see, but of course you can see that there's little gaps, in our segmentation. Now the easiest way to avoid this, I'm going to hit undo a couple times, is what I'll do. I'll go ahead and create an entirely different structure. We're going to go to the level of detail to be ultra. Now, if you're wondering exactly how to get this menu here, it's because we went over to the settings, we scrolled down, and we changed our our structure configurations rather, from default to advanced. So when you click that, you're going to get a little prompt it's going to give you a warning that basically says that if your structure is of high level of detail, and there's a large number of these high level detail structures or a large size, that's going to negatively impact computer performance there. So when it comes to the advanced structure configuration, even on my PC here, I make sure that I'm only segmenting tiny structures, not the big stuff. Don't use advanced structure configurations for ultra for the big stuff like bone or like the entire skeleton. Only when we're dealing with tiny anatomy such as this, the turbinates, or even, obviously depending on the level of detail of your CT scan, even the mastoid air cells. So in this case, I'm going to hit the level of detail to be ultra. We'll just keep that as structure 01 because it's going to be temporary. We'll call this blue. Once again, I'm just going to go to my grow tool. And now I'm able to actually segment the fine detail here. So you notice last time there was a gap between the segmentation. And in this case, you see that once again right here. That is the result of the image itself. There's nothing that we can do outside of a manual segmentation. I'm going to hit none if I want to connect that. Let's make sure seed is turned off as well. Just like that. And if we were picky, then we can clean it up. Just like so. But if we were sticking to just using the threshold, this is what would yield us. Just like so. So now, you'll notice that this structure is blue, but I want it to be actually part of the bone structure. Now, it's not mandatory. This is just more for demonstration purposes. If you want to leave it blue or a different structure altogether, by all means. But to include this as part of the bone structure, this yellow portion, I'm going to go to the modeling operations. I'm going to select structure A as bone. We're going to union it with structure 01. We're going to have the output as bone. So we're telling Elucis to incorporate this structure 01 into the bone. And then we'll see in just a second, as soon as I hit execute, and then I turn off the 2D, now this segmentation, this fine segmentation that I've done is now being included as part of the overall bone structure. Now, my advice is that make sure that this modeling operations is the last thing that you do. Otherwise, you'll be going back and forth. So now, moving on to the soft tissue portion, you mentioned that you want the soft palate, the tongue, and even the epiglottis. So let's start off with the tongue here. I'm going to go ahead and delete this previous structure 01 because we don't need that anymore. We'll call this guy tongue. And then what we're going to do now, we're going to set our threshold to that of the tongue. But of course, we're on the bone window right now, so we want to be able to see the tongue really well. So we'll just pop over to our image settings. We'll hit our little white button here, and we're going to hit soft tissue as our window width and leveling. Just going to turn off the threshold right now. We'll also get rid of the bone 2D segmentation. Now, of course, this is also image dependent, but sometimes you would like more contrast within your image to be able to see the border between the structures. You can kind of see the border between the soft palate uvula right here and the tongue, but we're going to try our best to see if we can magnify that level of difference there. And to modify the window width and leveling within the desktop mode, you're going to, on your keyboard, you're going to press down on the control button, and then using your left mouse clicker, you're going to click and drag left and right to modify the grayscale of the image, and then go up and down if you want to modify the brightness. So I actually think, personally, I like something just kind of like this. We can now really see that border between the uvula, soft palate, and the tongue. So now we can go ahead and resume our display threshold. And we're going to try to see if we can use the threshold to isolate the tongue. Now, just simply because both the tongue and the soft palate are both very similar in terms of radiographic density, of course, our threshold is going to follow suit here. But that's okay. So what we're going to do now, we're going to go ahead and turn off display threshold. We're going to make sure that we're in our grow tool once again. We're going to have seed enabled. Go ahead and make our sphere big. And then we're going to use the threshold in conjunction with the source image to segment the tongue. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically use my grow tool to allow me to honor that border between the soft palate and the tongue. I'm going to segment just exactly as I would, depending on how deep you go. It's entirely up to your preference. Scroll back just to make sure we get the medial and lateral portions. And this is why I like using the grow tool. It allows me to get really close without actually touching that soft palate. So that ends up crossing over there. We won't worry. There's actually a modeling operation that we can perform to create that division. We'll just keep going just like this. And we just perform this exactly, just cycling through the image, continuing the segmentation. And of course, we're using their threshold because it allows us to honor the border between soft tissue and bone and soft tissue and air. So that's exactly why we use this. So now we'll create a different structure. We'll move on to the soft palate. Make this a different color. We'll call this red. We'll make it nice and contrasted. So then once again, we'll use our grow tool, seed, and segment our soft palate. Let's go through this quickly. So now, as you can see right here, there's actually a border overlap between the soft palate structure and the tongue structure. So what we can do right now is actually we can perform a modeling operation just like what we did with the bone, or similar to, where we're actually going to do a subtraction to be able to create a nice crisp border. So in this case, what I want to do, I want to make the soft palate my structure A. The operation is going to be subtraction. Structure B will be the tongue, and then my output structure will be soft palate. And then as soon as I hit execute, you're going to see now that that border has now been a nice solid border has now been created between the tongue and the soft palate. Of course, we're always using our source image to honor that true border. but that's how you get that nice crisp border here. And just like with the bone, my advice here is to make sure that this multi-structure operations is the last thing that you perform. Otherwise, you're going back and forth. Same idea with the epiglottis. We'll just create a new structure for the epiglottis. Oops. And then we'll just segment it just like so. Now, the last portion that you mentioned here was the airway, the trachea right here. So, just like what we've been doing up in this point, we call this airway, we've been setting the threshold to match that of our tissue of interest. So in this case, this applies no different. We're going to hit display threshold. And up until this point, probably just in general, we've been dealing with the right hand and center of the sliders here. But now we actually want to take advantage of the left-hand slider because that's going to allow us to set thresholds that match radiolucent tissues, like air, for example. So we're going to use our sliders. We've set a nice threshold right here. We can even get a little bit closer if we'd like, just so that's nice and touching. And then just like what we've been doing before, let's make this, that's blue. Yeah, we'll keep that blue. We'll just be segmenting our airway just like so. Feel free to segment as much or as little of the oral cavity and airway as you'd like. Nice and quick. Just like so. Perfect. And then now, when we put it all together on our 3D model, tongue, soft palate, epiglottis, airway, going to make the bone transparent. Although this is rather incomplete, you can still see the differentiation between the two here. All right, so this concludes this mini tutorial on the workflow. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. And I hope you found this otherwise helpful.